Jackson, bringing to you spiritual songs and hymns and the power of the spoken word of God. First of all, giving thanks to God Almighty for blessing me with this another outpouring of his tender love and mercy, in that he has allowed me once again to be on this the time side of life and have this another blessed privilege to come to you in his name by way of this television medium. And as I always do, I'd like to continue to express my appreciation to the production staff for their continued service to the gospel truth. And it's my prayer that God will continue to bless him with those things that he knows that he's standing in need of. And I'm praying on your behalf as participant observers. And it is my prayer that God will continue to bless you and your family with all of those things that he knows that you're standing in need of as well. And then, of course, I'm encouraging you to pray on my behalf because I'm also standing in need of prayer, and it's only God who can provide me with those things that I'm standing in need of. Well, we've come to the last Sunday in the month of February, so tonight we will be concluding the 2026 tribute to Black History Month. And so this evening I will be presenting to you Huey P. Newton, the man who fought for Black America. So without any further remarks, Huey P. Newton, the man who fought for Black America.
This Civil Rights Act is a challenge to all of us to go to work in our communities and our states, in our homes and in our hearts, to eliminate the last vestiges of injustice in our beloved country.
Despite the passage of the 1960s civil rights legislation that followed the landmark U.S. Supreme Court ruling in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, 1954, African Americans living in cities throughout North America continue to suffer economic and social inequality. Poverty and reduced public services characterized these urban centers, where residents were subject to poor living conditions, joblessness, chronic health problems, violence, and limited means to change their circumstances. Such conditions contributed to urban uprisings in the 1960s, such as those in the Watts district of Los Angeles in 1965, among others, and to the increased use of police violence as a measure to impose order on cities throughout North America. It was in this context, and in the wake of the assassination of Malcolm X in 1965, that Merritt Junior College students Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale founded the Black Panther Party for self-defense on October 15, 1966. Unlike many of the other social and political organizers of the time, they took a more militant stance to the plight of Black communities in America. From October 1st to the 15th, 1966, both men would pen the organization's 10-point program and platform, a set of guidelines for the Black Panther Party's ideals and ways of operation, which called for better housing, jobs, and education for Black Americans. It also called for an end to economic exploitation of Black communities, along with military exemption. As at the time of the movement's birth, Newton was only 24, while Seale was 30 years old. This is the story of Black Power, the long-begun fight to by all means break free from the oppressive grip of the American system, a system whose fierce operations have raised firebrand Black leaders to the forefront of the historic struggle, leaders whose names can never be forgotten. This is the story of the great Huey P. Newton.
In America, Black people are treated very much as the Vietnamese people or any other colonized people, because we're brutalized, and the police are there not to, in our community, not to promote our welfare or for our security and our safety, but they're there to contain us.
The name Huey P. Newton evokes an era of mass resistance, of Black popular protest, and of the rise of revolutionary organizations across the land. Huey Percy Newton was born in Louisiana in 1942, named for the populist LA governor Huey Pierce Long, who ruled from 1893 to 1935, formerly known in the state as the Kingfish. In 1945, when Newton was 3 years old, his father moved the family to Oakland just as the war was ending and California's defense plants were closing. Walter had to resort to odd jobs as a brick mason, plumber, and carpenter while the family moved from one tiny two-bedroom apartment to another. Enter the streets of Oakland, a slender, short, beautiful boy, and the prospect terrified him. For while his father thought the name Huey was a respectful tribute to a gifted politician, to the hard, urban streets of Oakland, it was an invitation to an ass-whipping. Yes, this means that Huey had a pretty rough childhood. For a young black boy in a ghetto surrounding, trying to meet up as one tries, fitting into the dark, survival culture of the streets is no doubt demanding. The biggest guy often had the biggest fear, bigger than his own. He also learned that the best defense was often a stiff offense. As a direct consequence of these street battles, the young Newton boy earns a rather unflattering nickname, Crazy Huey. One can almost hear this Greek chorus whispered with a mix of fear and fascination. Who's that boy? Who are you talking about? That pretty boy right there. Don't mess with him, that's Crazy Huey. Simple put, from his earliest youth until adulthood, Newton was on a war footing. The major event that led to the formation of the Black Panther Party was the event that happened in Telegraph Avenue, which was about a 4.5-mile road stretching north from Huey Newton and Bobby Seale's hometown of Oakland to the campus of the University of California at Berkeley. It was a link between two distinctly different worlds, between the rough ghetto streets where they grew up and the steepled academic sanctuary so close by. For much of the early 1960s, what existed of a black student movement in the San Francisco Bay Area was organized by activists from Berkeley. And Newton and Seale, part-timers at a junior college in Oakland, followed the lead of those self-important middle-class leaders, but that began to change for good on the evening of Thursday, March 17, 1966, when Newton and Seale and a friend they called Weasel took a walk up Telegraph Avenue to look for two men and arrested them for disturbing the peace. At the police station, Newton and Seale phoned a friend at a campus group they belonged to called the Seoul Students Advisory Council, SSSEC, and arranged to borrow $50 to post bail. A few weeks later, Newton and Seale were driving around Oakland when he wanted his friend Huey Newton by his side.
Newton doesn't let anybody mess over his partners or whoever he's running with.
He would recall with admiration.
That's the way he is. That's the way he gets with any human being who tries to hurt him or his friends and his people and his family. That was a big thing.
Newton was also the more visionary of the two, the one who kept raising the idea of creating a new organization. A casual observer of the two might have been surprised that it was Seale who looked up to Newton. Seale was the older one by more than 5 years, the Texas-born military veteran and skilled mechanic who had worked in factories that supplied sheet metal for the Gemini rockets. He was more physically imposing, standing several inches above Newton's slight 5'7" 130-pound frame. Seale was also the extrovert, the actor in campus plays and performer in Oakland's coffee houses, compared to Newton, who was shy and hated speaking in front of crowds. But Newton was the tougher fighter with lightning-quick hands and a fearless readiness to take on all comers. He was the deeper thinker, a self-taught reader who had introduced Seale to the French existential philosophers Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre and helped Seale understand Frantz Fanon, the French African psychiatrist and author who saw armed rebellion as a path to psychological liberation. Newton was also the more visionary of the two, the one who kept raising the idea of creating a new organization that could appeal not just to privileged college students, but to the sort of struggling black folks the two had grown up with in the Oakland ghetto. The brothers on the street, Newton called them. However, with the correlating prospects both men shared, Huey and Seale hit the streets, organizing, and a revolutionary movement was born. It was pitched to black youth, especially ghetto youth, and they joined, and the organization grew. Young men and women would join and, perhaps for the first time in their lives, study, although not for a grade, but to learn about revolutionary ideas from struggles around the world, including China, Cuba, Algeria, South Africa, Vietnam and beyond. The Black Panther Party, abbreviated as BPP, would grow from its base of Oakland and expand to Richmond and Los Angeles and Seattle, Washington. But events occurring roughly a year after its founding would catapult the organization, in effect hydroplaning it, nationwide, exploding it, sending it into over 40 cities across America. The organization aimed to improve life in black communities, hence they took a stance against police brutality in urban neighborhoods by mostly white cops. Members of the group would go to arrests in progress and watch for abuse. Panthers ultimately clashed with police several times. The party's treasurer, Bobby Hutton, was eventually killed while still a teenager during one of these conflicts in 1968. With unapologetic flair, the organization punctuated its message with dramatic appearances that left a lasting impact. For example, to protest a gun bill in 1967, members of the Panthers entered the California legislature armed. The action was a shocking one that made news across the country. The group believed that violence, or the threat of it, might be needed to bring about social change. Under Newton's leadership, the Black Panther Party founded over 60 community support programs, which were later renamed survival programs in 1971. These programs included free food banks, medical clinics, sickle cell anemia tests, prison busing for families of inmates, legal advice seminars, clothing banks, housing cooperatives, and their own ambulance service. The most famous of these programs was the Free Breakfast for Children program, which fed thousands of impoverished children daily during the early 1970s. Newton also co-founded the Black Panther newspaper service, which became one of America's most widely distributed African-American newspapers. The Black Panther Party brought room for development as offices began to open in Boston, in Baton Rouge, in Philadelphia, in Chicago, Harlem, the Bronx, Winston-Salem, Omaha, Baltimore, Detroit, Jersey City, Kansas City, San Diego, and more. Where there were black communities, there were black militants, most moved by the masterful oratory and martyrdom of Malcolm X. These young brothers and sisters, mostly teenagers, formed the bulk of Black Panther membership. All of these brothers and sisters, thousands across the nation, joined in some degree because of their admiration, respect, and for some, veneration of the Minister of Defense. Most too did not know him. They never met him. They only read of him and fell in love. Some with him, some with his amazing vision, a Black Panther Party. Because Newton was complex, so was his creation. It changed constantly as he changed and developed from a Malcolmite nationalist organization to a revolutionary nationalist to a revolutionary internationalist to socialist to Maoist to what Newton termed an intercommunalist. This was Newton's theoretical construct. The nations were but illusions, assemblies of flags. For in the presence of a global imperial power such as the US, nations were at best communities. He believes that the US economic power shattered sovereignties. For those who controlled foreign economies actually controlled those states while the rest was subterfuge. On most occasions, Newton would frequent pool halls, campuses, bars, and other locations deep in the black community where people gathered in order to organize and recruit for the Panthers. While recruiting, Newton sought to educate those around him about the legality of self-defense. One of the reasons he argued why black people continued to be persecuted was their lack of knowledge of the social institutions that could be made to work in their favor. In Newton's autobiography, Revolutionary Suicide, he writes, "Before I took criminal evidence in school, I had no idea what my rights were." According to Bobby Seale, in 1967, he and Newton obtained copies of quotations from Chairman Mao Zedong from the Chinese bookstore in San Francisco to sell at University of California, Berkeley. With the proceeds, they purchased weapons to arm the Black Panther Party members for self-defense against police brutality. In his father, Newton had the rare example of a black man of his generation willing to stand up to whites in the South. Wiry and stern-looking with pale skin, piercing eyes, and a brush mustache, Walter taught his children that you can take a killing, but you can't take a beating. Huey grew up hearing accounts of his father's stubborn bravery. In one often told story, Walter publicly accused a white businessman of cheating him. When the angry merchant appeared at the family's house, Walter calmly walked out and sat on the running board of the man's car, knowing the glove compartment contained a gun. "If you hit me a lick, the other folks will have to hunt me down because you will be lying in the road dead," he warned the church. From his mother, Newton received light-hearted relief from the family's stresses and encouragement for the sensitive and creative side of his personality. Still barely out of her teens when her children were young, Amelia often seemed more like a playmate than a mother, leading them in laughter-filled games of jacks and hide-and-seek. Early on, she recognized an artistic bent in her youngest child and got him started on piano lessons that he continued for 7 years. But the Newton family had a tradition that older children looked after younger ones, and Newton was given to Walter Jr., the second born, known to everyone as Sonny Man. Sonny Man started taking his little brother to school and teaching him how to fight back when he was picked on. By elementary school, Newton had the fastest hands on the block, he recalled. He became champion of the pretend prize fights that black boys staged on Oakland street corners, boxing with towel-wrapped hands while winos placed nickel bets, and rewarded the last one standing with a box of Cracker Jack. In his father, Newton had the rare example of a black man of his generation willing to stand up to whites in the South. Walter Jr. was also a hustler. Melvin graduated from high school. He continued to live at home while enrolling at Oakland City College. In high school, a guidance counselor informed Huey that he wasn't college material, But watching Melvin pore over his philosophy and sociology books gave Huey other ideas. Read properly. So one day, he borrowed Melvin's copy of Plato's Republic and a dictionary. For several months, Huey spent hours each day, slowly making his way through the dense text. He looked up words in the dictionary, sounded them out, then pieced together sentences and trained himself to scan paragraphs. Finally, like the prisoner freed from the cave in Plato's allegory, he was able to grasp the meaning of what had once looked like only shadows on a page. In August 1970, Roy Wilkins, the sexagenarian leader of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, used his syndicated column to criticize Huey P. Newton for urging the formation of an all-MAC fighting unit to assist the Vietnamese National Liberation Front. Wilkins saw Black Power militancy as cynical and misguided. The Viet Cong may be hurting, Wilkins wrote, but nothing like the hurting of John Q. Black American. Of course, Huey knows about this suffering. It was the resentment over this treatment that led, at least in part, to the founding of the Black Panthers. But Huey, for all his talents, is also a revolutionary. And when he emerged from prison a month earlier, Newton addressed his supporters from atop the hood of a car. Wanting to bask in his newfound freedom, Newton took off his shirt, revealing a taut frame, the reward of a punishing jailhouse regimen of push-ups. Young and defiant, he was the physical embodiment of the new militancy that contrasted sharply with Wilkins's graying demeanor and bourgeois comportment. And yet, in contrast to the popular image of the fiery Black Power orator, Newton was charming but soft-spoken, and his public speeches were delivered in a nasal, breathless tone and a more deliberative manner than the soaring rhetoric of his contemporaries like Eldridge Cleaver and Stokely Carmichael. In his response to Wilkins's accusation of misplaced priorities, Newton defended the party's domestic survival programs: free breakfast for school children, free health clinics and sickle cell anemia screenings, free clothing and shoes, loans to welfare mothers, and bus trips for the families of prison inmates. Newton charged that Wilkins's criticisms reflected his obvious class interests and identification with the ruling circle, and belied his commitment to a reactionary internationalism, namely his support for Israel. Black people in America have long been affected in a negative way by America's war of imperialism, Newton wrote. We are internationalists because our struggle must proceed on many fronts. While we feed and clothe the poor at home, we must meet and attack the oppressor wherever he may be found. Newton's withering critique of Wilkins's ideological capitulation and hypocrisy came at the height of the Panthers' popularity. In a few short years, the Black Panther Party had grown from a local organization created to confront police brutality on the streets of Oakland and Richmond, California, to, as Students for a Democratic Society put it, the vanguard of the Black Revolution, and, in the eyes of Federal Bureau of Investigation Director and arch anti-communist J. Edgar Hoover, the greatest threat to the internal security of the country. If the Black Panther Party was the most iconic organization of the Black Power era, Newton was easily its most popular, recognizable figure. The early propaganda photo of Newton seated on a wicker throne with a carbine rifle in one hand and a spear in the other captured the spirit of the age and continues to haunt popular memory and lore of the 1960s, decades after he was gunned down at only 47 years of age during a drug dispute in 1989. Like the broader movement he gave birth to, Newton's life was at various turns inspirational and tragic. Following his release, Newton struggled to integrate back into party life. The international campaign to win his freedom had made Newton a powerful symbol of the organization, but in many ways the party had outgrown his command, and others vied for influence beyond the Bay Area. Compounding these challenges was the split that developed between Newton and Eldridge Cleaver in early 1971 over the primary function of the party. Newton wanted the party to focus on serving African American communities, while Cleaver thought the focus should be on building relationships with international revolutionary movements. This rift resulted in violence between the factions and the deaths of several Black Panther members. The combined weight of heightened police repression and his own paranoia fueled Newton's addiction and reprehensible behavior. His rhetoric and political courage inspired thousands to stand against war, racism, and imperialism. And yet at other moments, he succumbed to personal acts of brutality and self-destruction. Newton's political formation came amid the new nationalist militancy of the early 1960s. But the primary period examined here is a very brief historical window, a mere 6 years, from the establishment of the party in 1966 to Newton's pronouncement in 1972 that the party was putting down the gun and finding ways to work within the American system. This time frame also corresponds to the birth of Black Power as a political slogan and the consolidation of radical and moderate forces around Black ethnic politics at the 1972 National Black Political Convention held in Gary, Indiana. The year 1972 also marked a critical turning point in the Cold War, with Nixon embarking on a diplomatic visit to Mao Zedong's China, beginning the process of normalization between the two nations and foreshadowing the turn to liberal economic reform under Deng Xiaoping. After returning to the United States from his visit to China, Newton was tried for a variety of violent offenses, such as assault and multiple murders. These charges resulted in him fleeing to Havana, Cuba, to escape prosecution for 3 years. Upon his return, he stood trials for one more assault and murder and was acquitted of both charges. In 1972, Newton, using intercommunalist theory, predicted the fall of the Soviet Union. 1972, while traditional Marxists ridiculed Newton's ideas, the Soviet Union shuttered its doors on Dec 26, 1991, 2 years after Newton's ignoble death on a street corner by a crack dealer. But the major reason why the Panthers fell apart was due to factionalism, with later allegations surfacing that the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover was clandestinely involved in the organization's unraveling. Key members left, while Newton and Elridge Cleaver, the party's Minister of Information, split ways. By mid-decade, Newton had allegedly become increasingly paranoid, addicted to crack cocaine, and prone to violent behavior. On August 6, 1974, Kathleen Smith, a 17-year-old Oakland native and child prostitute, was shot. She died 3 months later. According to the prosecutor handling the case, Newton is believed to have shot Smith after a casual exchange on the street during which she referred to him as Baby, a childhood nickname he hated. The main witness of this case refused to testify due to an assassination attempt against her, and after 2 deadlocked jury trials, Newton was not convicted. Newton is also alleged to have assaulted his tailor over the price of a suit. Newton posted bond after being arrested for pistol whipping the tailor in 1974. The incident occurred after a dispute arose regarding the price of a custom-made suit. Newton, known for his status as a prominent figure in the Black Panther Party, reportedly became enraged over the cost and the perceived overcharging. This event is often referenced in discussions of Newton's complex persona, which combined revolutionary ideals with a more flamboyant and sometimes violent personal side. Newton was subsequently arrested a second time for the murder of Smith, but was able to post an additional $80,000 0 bond, thus securing his release until trial. Newton and his girlfriend, who later became his wife, Gwen Fontaine, then fled to Havana, Cuba, where they lived until 1977, which prevented further prosecution on the 2 charges. Elaine Brown took over as chairperson of the Black Panther Party in his absence. Newton returned to the United States in 1977 to stand trial for the murder of Smith and the assault on the tailor. In October 1977, 3 Black Panthers attempted to assassinate Crystal Gray, a key prosecution witness in Newton's upcoming trial who had been present the day of Kathleen Smith's murder. Unknown to the assailants, they attacked the wrong house and the occupant returned fire. During the shootout, one of the Panthers, Louis Johnson, was killed and the other 2 assailants escaped. Newton denied any involvement or knowledge and said that the events might have been the result of overzealous party members. After the assassination attempt on Crystal Gray, she declined to testify against Newton. After 2 trials and 2 deadlocked juries, the prosecution decided not to retry Newton for Smith's murder. During Newton's trial for assaulting the tailor, who changed his testimony several times, eventually told the jury that he did not know who assaulted him. In September 1978, Newton was acquitted of the assault but convicted of illegal firearms possession. He eventually served 9 months in prison in 1987. In the early hours of August 22, 1989, Newton was murdered in front of 1456 9th Street near the corner of Center Street in the Prescott neighborhood of Oakland, California. Newton's last words were, You can kill my body and you can take my life, but you can never kill my soul. My soul will live forever. Internationalism, the Panthers embodied. Let's offer a critical analysis of some of the central ideas offered by Newton that were at times widely shared among black power radicals and continue to shape left approaches to US inequality. Newton's political ideas evolved from a formative nationalist period where he and other black radicals embraced concepts from decolonization struggles to a more speculative left period after his 1970 release from prison, when he offered more original approaches to thinking about the American empire and potential paths to socialism. Whereas the formative period grew out of his experiences in Oakland's black ghetto and were organized around the pursuit of black national liberation through armed self-defense and serving the people, the latter period was shaped by the expanded platform Newton gained as a celebrated political prisoner and focused increasingly on a notion of socialist revolution predicated on popular control of the forces of production. These transformations in his thinking were also undoubtedly influenced by the process of black political incorporation that was unfolding across the nation. The concomitant expansion of the black professional managerial class and hyper-segregation of the black urban poor would spell the end of the black colony as a geographic reality and as a central thematic of black political discourse. The colonial analogy was powerful as a means of connecting both the second-class citizenship endured by blacks and the grim human toll and social contradictions produced by American commercial and military power abroad, made so visible around the globe, from the Congo and Indonesia to Cuba and Vietnam, actions orchestrated by the Central Intelligence Agency to undermine left populist movements and destabilize socialist regimes. As Newton discovered, however, such attempts to transpose modes of thinking born in the colonized world onto the advanced industrial context of the United States could not pinpoint the specific political and economic manifestations of empire that Americans faced on the domestic front, nor deliver an analysis that might have united black and white, suburban and urban, unionized and non-unionized, waged and unemployed into a counterpower capable of transforming American society. Newton came to terms with the limitations of the colonial analogy and offered precious insights regarding the unique problems facing Americans who would oppose empire from within, but he reached these fresh conclusions just as the social struggles of the 1960s were entering a phase of demobilization. Dr. Huey P. Newton dared a struggle and inspired millions to also fight against a twisted, broken, racist system. He built an organization that rattled the cages of oppressed and oppressor alike. Then, like the true Nietzschean he was, he shattered it into 1,000 pieces. He lived, he rebelled, he inspired, he died. But most of all, he rebelled. That's more than most of us can say. That brings us to the end of yet another poignant video. And if you learned a thing or two, encourage us by hitting the thumb up button, share video with family and friends to keep spreading our black narrative, and subscribe to stay tuned into us. We are delighted to have you on this journey. Thank you for watching.